Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Over the Head podcast. This has been in the making for about over a year or so, and I'm excited to be announcing that we are finally here, episode 1, with myself and Scott Ratliff. The main reason we wanted to start this podcast was to kind of give you all the insights, the storylines, the controversy, all the drama of the PLL season. We are also going to be covering college lacrosse, but our bread and butter will be the Premier Lacrosse League, since we have spent over 35 plus years together combined in the sport of lacrosse, and we love talking about it, and we're going to break that down for you in that. So why do this podcast, right? This is not your typical podcast. We'll have analytics, we'll be breaking down games, statistics, but we'll be keeping this fun, full of banter, full of back and forth, disagreeing with each other, and we will have guests on as well to kind of talk about professional lacrosse, the landscape, and everything you need to know. Coming up, we'll be breaking down the 2025 college lacrosse season, the PLL Champ Series, roster breakdowns, and all the news and the stories surrounding the PLL Champ Series coming up, in an unbelievable 2025 college lacrosse season that's coming up and will be on deck. So, Scott, I don't know if you have anything to talk about, kind of like maybe your vision of this podcast, what you foresee it being.
Well, 35 years of combined pro lacrosse experience, so that's what, 33 of those are yours. And probably, I don't know if that math checks out. No, you covered it for me. I think how we ended up here, Hartzell and I, we've played against each other for a long time. This is the first time we've ever been teammates in some capacity, I think, and we found ourselves just spending a lot of time texting and talking in group chats about whatever it is, off-season storylines or our point of view on what's happening broadly in the lacrosse community and the PLL specifically. Kyle, you know all too well, I love to talk shit. I've been retired for a couple years now, and so maybe if nothing else, this was just a way for me to find an arena where I could get on here and share my strong opinions about the game and the people playing it. So I'm excited to do it, man. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I thought maybe, we could start with, like, on that note, I was thinking about how do we break the ice, like getting into a podcast, not an easy thing to do. How do you differentiate what's unique about your and I's relationship that could make this dynamic entertaining? And so I was thinking about how I could maybe just talk some shit to you to kick us off and just demonstrate, how I like to do this. And I was coming up blank, Kyle. I couldn't figure anything out. So what I did is I went on to ChatGPT and I asked it to in the voice of a podcast host to roast Kyle Hartzell. And the response I got, which I'm going to read to you, was honestly brilliant. So it said that Kyle Hartzell plays like he's still trying to prove something to the JV coach who didn't start him in high school. And can we talk about his brand building for a second? The merch, the training programs, the Instagram reels. It's like he's trying to become the Tony Robbins of lacrosse defense. What's next? A Kyle Hartzell masterclass on how to simultaneously commit a slash and act surprised when the ref called it. But honestly, love him or hate him, the guy knows how to stay relevant. He's like the Tom Brady of deep holes if Tom Brady drank pre-workout by the gallon and thought CrossFit was a personality trait. And so then I asked it to add in a little quip about hunting, and it told me that what's with all of his hunting posts? Is he the only guy who wears camos when he wants to be seen? So ChatGPT, honestly, I was impressed with that output, and I thought, you know what, I might have to come back to this well if we if I get sick of talking shit to you, maybe we can throw a different PLL player in here every week and start telling the truth about some things, you know.
I like it. ChatGPT did a pretty good job of giving you a breakdown of me. I think that was pretty accurate.
We're both obviously passionate about lacrosse in general, and both follow, you know, lacrosse all the way through. And frankly, from high school to club to college to pro, I'd say where we both probably have our strongest opinions and our closest followership is in pro lacrosse, just given much we've been around that game. So in that spirit, maybe we start with talking through, PLL, off-season storyline, sixes, and then we'll end this episode with kind of a preview of the college lacrosse season to kick us off. Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, so maybe I think we made a list of these off-season storylines, and you and I kind of agree the biggest one probably, and there's two that really have grabbed the headlines, but maybe the biggest one from our perspective is the Pat Kavanaugh trade. Obviously, you've got a guy who was the face of college lacrosse, was a number 6 overall pick in the PLL draft, and just never really and a unique point of view. You were coaching on the Cannon staff last year, but just never really found a home there in the Cannon's offense. And so Brian Holman makes a move this offseason, trades Pat for draft picks right to the Denver Outlaws. And I'd love to just hear from you. I mean, how that all played out, what you think about it from both a Cannon's perspective, why you do it, what you got in return, and then, from a Cav perspective as well. Curious just how that all went down and what you think of it.
Yeah, obviously we all know the Kavanaugh name in the sport of lacrosse. His brother Matt, I played with and against, and you did as well for a very long time. But yeah, Pat, we got him in the PLL draft. There was a big. We'll touch more on this, but star-studded draft. There was a lot of offensive guys coming in from college lacrosse this past year, and he was a big name in that draft, and he kind of fell to us. We picked him up, and Coach Brian Holman's biggest thing in the draft is pick the next best available player, and he was the best available player there was. And obviously his natural position is playing attack, but joining our team, you got Asher Nolting, who is continuing to be in the top point production of any attackman, ex-attackman. He's a big guy, and he's a lot to handle. And you got one of the best shooters, if not the best shooter in the world right now, Marcus Holman. And then now on our left side, we don't know what that's going to look like, but Will Manny's over there. He's coming to training camp after the Whip Snakes let go of him last year, but. Yeah, Pat kind of came in and he was running out of the midfield and was kind of open to doing that. And then, kind of towards the end of the season, I think he kind of got, changed his mind a little bit. I actually, took him out to dinner in Boston or that was a lunch, but I took him out and kind of talked to him, got to know him a little bit. Great kid, and wants to do full-time lacrosse like we all do in this sport. It's nice to just do that full-time rather than having a desk job. But he's a guy that's trying to do it full-time, and, kind of towards the end of the season, he just, we asked Coach Holman for a trade. It actually surprised me. I thought he was bought into being a Cannon. And, when he asked for that trade, I was a little, thrown off by it. And he ultimately obviously landed on the Outlaws. But again, in this league, you've played for a long time. I played for a very long time. When you demand trades and do that stuff, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. So I'll be curious to see how he pans out. Obviously, he's a tremendous competitor, a great player. But again, like when you go to another team, it might not work out for you. You look at their attack unit over there, and you got Brendan O'Neill, who's mainly playing on that left side, and who knows? I don't think Eric Law is going to be playing next year, so maybe they throw him there at X, and we'll see what happens. But again, like demanding.
So Kyle, let me and I have an opinion on Pat that I'm going to get to.
Yep.
But take me through drafting him, because I heard you say in there, Brian's, and obviously you're part of these conversations with him in the offseason, but his point of view is drafted the best player available. And I remember on draft night, like having Pat Cav there at 6, you never would imagine it. So it's like, how do you not take this guy? With that being said, like from where I'm sitting now, I mean, why draft a righty attackman when the two best players on your offense are righty attackmen in that situation? Was that brought up? Was that thought through? Like, was there conversations about how he fits into the offense? And I know that would have been Jim Mitchell, the offensive coordinator, but help us understand how those conversations go between Brian and the staff, and when you're making that decision to bring in a guy who is obviously a stud but plays the same position as your established stars.
Yeah, I think, Brian was also looking at the future a little bit with that pick, right? Marcus, he's been kind of talking about he only wants to play for a couple more years, so we got to find a replacement for him. And I think you look at Jim Mitchell and what he's done with that offense. If any of the fans watching, it's positionless lacrosse. Like those attackmen, it's a lot of motion in the offense. Guys are all over the place. And Pat, I kind of saw him as a hybrid as well, and I think Coach Holman did too, and so did Coach Jim Mitchell, who's the Princeton offensive coordinator. But Pat was good coming out of the box, right? Getting a short stick. I think he thrived in doing that and opened up a lot of guys around him on that offense. But again, I think, Brian was also looking for the future because Marcus, obviously, I think he's 33 years old, going to be 34. Looking for replacements for those guys if they do retire. I think Marcus, if the Cannons were to win a championship, I don't think he's playing after that. I think he's going to hang him up. So I think Marcus is inside 2 or 3 years. So I think finding guys that are going to step up are ready attackmen. I think Pat Kavanaugh would have been somebody. He was available in the draft and at 6, and I think Brian, obviously picked him up for his playmaking ability that we all saw in the college season last year. And I think just having a replacement for guys that are, that are pretty much looking at retirement. And that was Marcus. I think he'd be a good replacement for him.
I think they got, this is bad podcasting. I don't know what you guys got in return. I say you guys, you're not coaching on the Cannons anymore. So I don't know what they got in return for him, but I want to say it's like the 3rd pick. So in that
did you just break news? That I'm not coaching on the Cannons.
I might have. That's actually a good question.
Continue.
But I don't know what I think they ended up with the 3rd pick. So like you could say in theory, it's an upgrade. Like they'll have a chance to pick somebody 3rd overall, and maybe you get more production out of that person than you did out of Pat. I can see it where in college that national championship run his senior year, a lot of damage he was doing was running out of the box. Well, not running out of the box, but running up and then dodging down that alley. He scored a lot of like alley on the run. I guess then where it leads me, and maybe I'll try to give my whole point of view here. One is if you pick him with the idea of we'll play him in midfield. You guys obviously the Cannons had a tough loss to the Chaos. They got couldn't find any offense, but the beginning of that game he was super aggressive. Like he didn't find the net. He missed Cage on a shot or two that were good looks, and Blaze got him on 1 or 2. And then over the course of the game, it seemed like he was wearing down and the offense was getting frustrated and it got uglier. But you could see like he was a focal point of the offense at the beginning of that game. He had the shorty. It was like, we're going to come out and give it to Pat against the shorty and invert and dodge. If that's the thought process, which is let's draft him now, let's use him out of the box, and let's put a succession plan in for Marcus, who's getting old. But Marcus, as we know, is like fine wine. He seems to get better every year right now. So we'll see if he's done in a year or two. Then why trade him? Like to me, it's like in another sport, like just because a guy's unhappy, like then all he has to do is say, I don't want to be here anymore. And it's like, all right, peace. Like, I just feel like there should be, maybe not should be, but maybe they're like commit to the plan. No, I mean, I'm not just going to trade you. And I don't know what what his deal is. If it's a 1-year deal and he could have just gone into free agency. I'm not sure about those rookie contracts. Maybe the whole situation just seems a little strange to me. I think my gut response when I heard the news was, you alluded to it a little bit about the grass isn't always greener. The Kavanaughs are known for toughness. Like, I don't even have to talk about it. Everybody that follows across has heard about how tough Pat Kavanaugh is. This to me feels like it lacks a little bit of toughness. Like, and maybe this is the new era of athlete. And I don't want to be grumpy old man from the perspective of you control your destiny, get yourself into a good situation. Like, great, good for you. But to me, he put the bullseye now on his back. Like, you're basically saying, I don't want to be on the Cannons because I need to go somewhere where I can play attack. Well, if you looked around the league, what team is he the starting attackman on? Like, he's getting guarded by a shorty. Asher's back there at X because Asher's scoring goals consistently on the best defenseman in the league. So my initial reaction to that was like, I don't like that feels, I came into the league, I had to back up Sweeney and Brody for years and play out of position, and you kind of earn your way. And there's guys who obviously come right in and, are slotted right into the perfect spot. I get that happens. I just wonder, putting that kind of target on your back a little bit by saying I should be a starting attackman in this league and going somewhere where I'm now playing X and now I'm being covered by Matt Dunn. Like, I'm not saying that he's incapable, because obviously the guy is one of the best lacrosse players in the world, probably will prove me wrong and do really well in that scenario. But that would be my like point of view on it is you better deliver. Like, you know, if you're not going to I'll fit in wherever the team needs me kind of point of view, or if you're not going to be that guy, then like you better go to this next stop and prove that you deserve to be the guy with the ball on your stick all the time. And as I kind of thought more about it, I don't think there is a better place he could have landed than on that Outlaws roster. You talked about it. Like they've got, first off, they have a super young core on offense. So just even from a fit and a leadership perspective, like he's not going to be around two guys who, you know, in Marcus and Asher, who have been here forever and have a way of doing things, blah, blah, blah. He's going to be with a bunch of other young guys who are carving out their place in the sport and in the league, and I think that could be good for him. Second, you have a wing player who demands the top matchup. So it's one of the only few places in the league where you can go be the ex-attackman and you're going to get covered by the number 2 or the number 3 defenseman, because Brendan O'Neill is going to continue to demand kind of that top cover guy most of the time. Graham Hossack's going to probably be on Brendan O'Neill, right? So I think for him, the pushback I have against myself is like maybe it's the proof that he is right in doing that, and just that look where he landed, look at the situation he's in now. I would say like that team is young, it's on the rise, they've got a great young offense, and they seemingly have a gap in exactly what he brings to the table as far as being an ex-attackman, you know, and a guy who I think, in my opinion, at this time could consistently break down number 2 defenseman, number 3 defenseman, and he's playing with a guy who doesn't play his position, who's going to demand the top matchup, which maybe that's where the breakdown is with Asher, right? You've got a guy an Asher who demands a top matchup, but you're both righty, you both like to play behind the cage, and that's harder. So I do think it's a better fit, but I think he put a little bit of pressure on himself by 1 year into the league, you know, demanding a trade to get to a different situations. Bold move, Cotton.
Yeah, that's bold move. But we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, like you said, I think it's a good landing. If any team in the league, right, it's a good spot because the Outlaws don't really have an ex-attackman. Eric Law, obviously he's done what he did for so many years, but I think he's retiring. It didn't look like they re-signed him. So we'll see what happens.
All right. So the next big story then was Andy Towers. And this is another one where we could probably talk for an hour just on this, because I think there's a lot of aspects to it. But obviously, Andy Towers steps down as the Chaos coach. Most of the stories that kind of come out, you know, on the other side of it are, it sounds like the league went to him and said, we want you to replace one of your assistants, right? And I think what we've heard through the grapevine a little bit is presumably offensive assistant. He said no. You know, I'm not replacing my assistant. They said, you need to. And he said, I'm not. And they said, well, it's either do that or, you know, you're all kind of out. And like some version of that is what I've heard, is how that went down. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on, I mean, there's a lot there, but where do you start when you think about that story?
Yeah, I mean, when you first heard it, I mean, I think, you know, when anytime there's lacrosse news or something gets broken, you can just look at the comment section, how bad it gets in there. They're like, oh, the PLL anti-Andy Towers. And then the story kind of came out. I think somebody had posted, maybe Lacrosse All-Stars, or somebody had posted, you know, I think it was like a week after it, after all the banter and all the noise was like kind of dying down, was, you know, I guess Panetta got bad reviews from the players. At the end of the year, they send out these questionnaires, and you kind of just talk about what you like, what you don't like, and a lot of teams don't, you know, some stuff people don't complain about. And I guess offensive coordinator was a big thing with the players, and PLL saw that and wanted to make a fix. And when they, you know, told Towers that, I mean, sounds like he's a super loyal guy. I've obviously gotten to know him just throughout the, you know, being around the league for the last, you know, 4 or 5 years, but he's a really loyal guy. That was his buddy, I guess, and didn't want to was bullheaded on it and didn't want to make a change. And PLL was pretty much like, you got to make a change or you're all gone. And they just axed all of them. So that team is obviously going to look a lot different heading into the 2025 season. They haven't announced anybody yet, but it'll be interesting to see who they hire on that. But I tip my cap to him a little bit, just because like that was his staff, that's who he believed in, and you know he didn't want to make that change and kind of just said we're all out. If he's out, we're all out. And you got it, like every year they're in the thick of it, right? Every year they just kind of throughout the year, it doesn't really go well for them. And then they're very inconsistent. And then as soon as the playoffs come around, they kind of make it to the playoffs. And, for the Archers a while ago, they were always, in the Final Four, and they would make it to a championship, and they're just always in it. And that's because of Blaze Reardon in between the pipes. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who they hire there. That was a big storyline, and obviously he's gone, but I think you're going to see him on the sidelines. I think he'd be good at like ESPN broadcasting. He's probably going to injure more players on the sideline, handshakes and back slaps. But it'll be interesting to see what that team looks like next year. It's going to be a completely different look, and they got a lot of free agents, so it'll be interesting to see who stays and who goes come season time.
What I'm curious about, like digging in further, I think a lot of people, to your point, in the lacrosse world that maybe haven't been in the locker room the way that you and I have, it's like you get this really binary point of view. Like Paul and Mike and the league is, this is bullshit. The league just, they didn't like Towers taking the attention, or like whatever the hell people say in that direction. Or it's like there's people who hate Andy Towers for his antics and his, whatever. What about, like, in your opinion, because it's unique to the PLL, I think, in pro sports right now, what's a better way to handle when you don't have individual ownership over teams, right? There's a centralized management structure at the league level. You talked a little bit about, and for everybody, who doesn't kind of know this, season ends, surveys go out, performance reviews go out, right? The coaches are responsible for performance review of their teams, and they have control over changing their rosters. But in the same way, the players, and my assumption is kind of the advice, like the lacrosse board, which would be Paul, Mike, Seth Tierney, the kind of lacrosse people who are in the front office there at the PLL, those folks and the players all review the coaching staffs. And the changes that get made at the coaching staff level are a result of those kind of peer reviews. Is there anything else that is involved in that you're aware of? Or do you think it's peer reviews come in, peer reviews, and I say player reviews, whatever it is, aren't good for this, and there's a certain score that tells the ops team at the PLL we have to make a change? Like do you have any insight? I haven't coached in the league. You have, into exactly how that works? Is it somebody's judgment at whose judgment ultimately is like the one who makes the call of like, we have to move on from an OC here or else the whole staff has?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you touched on like the board that they have formed. Seth Tierney's obviously been coaching Division I lacrosse for I don't know how many years, Team USA. And then you got, I think Rachel DeCecco was part of that. And I think, with the player surveys, I guess whatever came up on them, I'm not sure what came up on them, but, your star players, Josh Byrne, I mean, somebody said something to somebody to get that on their radar. And at the end of the day, like, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if your star players or whoever's doing that, kind of brings that up to their attention, I mean, you kind of have to make a trade. You can't just keep staying the course, staying the pattern of what's going on. If they're bringing that issue up, it's got to be dealt with. And if it's not dealt with, like, that problem is going to just fester and it's going to get worse. So I'm sure somebody said something to somebody and then they kind of looked into it a little bit more, and just that's kind of where they landed and wanted to make that change. And that's what happened. So we'll see what happens with that. And, just from looking on, if you watch like sidelines or, I never saw that guy in a huddle on TV, like drawing something up. So I don't know what the issue was, but something was the issue with him, and it came up, and they decided to make a change. So I would say, like, if I had to put my, guess, I would say a lot of the star players, the guys that start and play on that offense, probably brought it up to the board or whoever's in charge of that, and kind of, I think started that conversation to where it landed, and they wanted to make a change. So,
all right. So my other segment that I'm bringing to the table here is my weekly poetic review of a lacrosse topic. So when this all went down, I wrote a poem and I sent it to you, and decided it would be a good starting place for me to share my opinion on this whole thing, this whole story. So this is my Andy Towers poem. Andy Towers, you screaming son of a bitch, in your medium large shirts with your playoff AOS smirks. Your presence on the sideline will be greatly missed. but is there a reason your staff was dismissed? Drawing up plays with no whiteboard in sight. Run a 2-man game for Burn. It'll all be all right. At the end of the day, at least we got Blaze, Jack and Jared to keep the crease safe. Andy Towers, I've got nothing but respect. Please help out our ratings and come on over the head.
It's pretty good, Scott. I like that.
Thank you. So, look, Andy is one of the most entertaining aspects of the Premier Lacrosse League. And just like you, I got to know him, on tour there. Like, he's one of the best guys there is to be around. Like, and what I appreciate so much about him is, one of the things that's hard in pro lacrosse sometimes, and with the relationships with coaching staffs, and I would assume this in all pro sports, is everybody here is adults. A lot of the best players are qualified to be coaches of these teams themselves, frankly. And those relationships can be hard to manage. And Andy Towers was as straightforward and honest of a communicator as there was. And I think as much as any coach in the league, his team took on his personality, in such a clear way. And he had a ton of success, and it worked. If I have a criticism sitting down at home, watching the Chaos play last season, and this is a pet peeve, Kyle, of mine, going back to the playing games, to my playing days, is so often these coaches, you get into the PLL does such a great job, right? You're in the huddle with them, in the cameras and the mics are in the huddle in these late game situations, and it's a tie game and there's 20 seconds left and you're coming out of a timeout, and it's like they're drawing up plays with off the top of their mind, like, hey, okay, here's who's in the game, and they're just like looking around the huddle and picking guys out, and then they're saying, do this, and this. And there are a lot of obviously really high IQ guys in the league, and that can kind of work. But like that to me is where the professionalism just totally breaks down. It's like, that's not good enough. You can't go into a late game huddle and not have a plan and not know that your 6 guys in that situation need to know who they are. Like, you shouldn't have to go around the huddle and say, here's who's on the field. And when I watch the Archers in those huddles, and obviously they've had 2 championships, and by the way, we didn't have them. I mean, I think Coach Bates has done such a good job of kind of learning over time. They know exactly who they are. If it's the end of the huddle and you go in the Archers huddle, you hear Bates say, all right, we're going to run Jordan. And, that's probably the 2-3 right set that they're starting out in. And we're going to look for the first look for Fieldsy off the pick, because Jordan is some sort of party starter. It's some sort of motion out of a 2-3. Tom's probably going to dodge, send it to Fieldsy, probably run and set it down screen. Fieldy's going to come off of it, and there's going to be a mumbo for, Matt Moore on the backside. So, like, everybody knows, like, what Jordan is. And within Jordan, there's 2 or 3 looks, right? There's Fields, Tom could dodge and run by his guy and shoot it on the run. Once he gives it to Fieldsy could come off that pick. If he gets a switch, it might be a long dodge on the shorty matchup. They don't get the switch. Matt Moore's mumbling on the backside. That's look number 3. We get it to Matt, and there's a step down there. Like, and then the conversation goes, we're going to run Jordan. Let's get it to Fieldsy. Let's get through it. If Matt's not there, then let's stay in the 2-man Fieldsy and Mac on the left side. Like, and there's way less, like, we've practiced this. We ran this last night. We ran this in walkthrough this morning. We've run this in different times of different games over the course of the season. It's not a one option, one hitter play. It's a set that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4 options to try to find a good look. And that's what I really grew frustrated with watching the Chaos offense last year. Like, they had a tough year, but like, Blaze and that defense keep them in every game. And I think Towers and Josh Byrne, like, the offense also like gives them a chance to win a lot of games. And where I just felt like they really fell short last year was a lot of those late game scenarios in close games. They were disjointed and disorganized on, coming out of a timeout or coming out of a huddle. And I make the joke about whiteboards, but like, even something as simple as that, if we're going to draw a play from scratch, like, let's draw it on a whiteboard. Let's not just sit here and talk it out. So I feel like that was probably, again, I don't know. I'm not in that locker room. I haven't talked to those guys. But if I were on that team, that probably would have been the thing that I'm maybe putting in the feedback section of the coaches review. And I hate that it ended in, Andy Towers losing. I think the league is worse off with him not coaching, but I agree with you, Kyle. I joke about getting him on here because, I mean, the guy is electric to watch and listen to, and I hope he ends up in a broadcasting role for sure. So I think we're on the same page there. So quickly, and I know we should get into like our college preview, and there's a few other things to talk about. I think the other kind of big offseason storyline, right, is Zed. Matt Brandow and Zed trading places. The Whip's kind of moving on from him. You got, any 60-second thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Water Dogs last year, they just, a lot of one-goal games, and I think that spot, that righty attackman on their roster was kind of like a very big inconsistency. Ethan Walker, when we played them in Boston, we didn't really think he warranted a long pole, so we just put a short stick on him, and I don't even think he did much in that game. So putting Zed Williams down there, it's going to draw a lot of attention for defenses now with him. Sowers obviously dodging from X. I think he adds a level of toughness to that offense that's going to be, I think they made out in that trade for sure. What do you think?
So my point of view is Zed, when he's on, is elite, the best, one of the top 2 or 3 attackmen in the league.
He called game. He called game this weekend in the Mammoth game. So he's a gamer.
Yeah. We don't have an indoor segment. I don't know anything. I didn't even know what's a mammoth. Can't wait to get all the Canadians. I'm not on social media, but you get in my DMs and get angry. I have no idea. Sounds good. Congrats to him. The only place, it's not even a disagreement with you, but my only kind of thought on this is the Whipsnakes rode a youth movement to the championship game last year. I've been a part of teams where we've had legends and young guys, and early in my career, and a lot of these kind of big older guys retired or moved on or stepped out of the way, and then we had our best success. Then I was just on the other end of that. We had a bunch of us 30 years old who had been around and kind of made names for ourselves in the game and with the Archers, and we couldn't get over the hump, and then a bunch of us leave and they win 2 championships. Like, I do think there is something to empowering the younger generation and getting new leadership voices and those things. And I do wonder, like Matt Brandow, incredible college career at Yale, didn't do much last year. He ran out of the box on the Water Dogs, kind of like the Pat Cav thing. Like, he didn't, he was kind of a nothing burger. I just wonder if all of a sudden he's on a starting attack line and he's playing with a bunch of other dudes who are his age and his generation, if that doesn't empower him to step back into Yale Matt Brandow and like create some magic. And I think you have to have veteran presence on a team, but the Whipsnakes have that. You've got Rambo, you've got Matt Dunn and those guys down on defense. You've got Nardella, who's an incredible leader at the face-off X. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you Matt Brandow today is a better pro lacrosse player than Zed. Like, Zed's unbelievable, but just from like a team culture and fit and who are we and what are we doing, I think the trade makes sense for both teams. The Water Dogs are thinking, look, Kieran, Sowers, Zed, this is a win now move. Let's go. They've been in championships. They've won one. Let's go get another one with this core group that we have. So I get it from their perspective, but I also get it from the Whipsnakes perspective, where it's like Zed is maybe at times inconsistent a little bit. I know you can see Staggs gets frustrated at him sometimes, seeming slightly disinterested, but then when he turns it on, it's like the most unbelievable thing in the world. So I think both teams kind of got what they were looking for and ultimately win this trade. But if I'm standing on a take, it's that I think Brandow is going to, hopefully he's not working for Merrill Lynch and,
where lacrosse players go to die.
Yeah, but if he's not, I think he really could be special on that Whipsnakes offense, playing with Malone, playing with Levi, and kind of this Patra from this other generation of rookies and young players that Tucker Dordovic, that the Whipsnakes are now have now kind of turned themselves into, where it's like Rambo's the only old guy on that offense. So that's, I think that'll be really interesting to watch. So last thing, Kyle, on PLL, and let's get in. Or if you got something else, we can go. But I want to make sure we keep moving here.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I think he's gonna stink, but yeah, let's move to the next thing.
You think Brandhouse is gonna stink?
Yeah, I think he's done.
The good players out of Ivy League schools, you got Matt Gibson, had a nice little career at Yale, but Matt, definitely didn't work for Merrill Lynch. Who else? I mean, there's
Max Sebald, Rob Pennell. Max Sebald, Rob Pennell, they played for a very long time. Rob's still playing, obviously, but yeah, Ben Reeves. Ben Reeves dominated, and then I think that kid's curing cancer or something.
Reeves did not dominate. He did not dominate pro lacrosse.
He was a matchup problem for sure.
Yeah, for the second D midi, I think we had. Yeah, I think we would put when Ambler was stuck on defense, we would put him on Reeves, and then maybe we'd be fine. So, whatever. So yeah. I hear you, but is that why you think it? Because Brandon, you think it's just he's not a pro lacrosse player?
Yeah, some of these guys that get in the league, they don't pan out, or maybe I think last year they were playing him a lot at midfield, and they'd put Walker down there, he'd be at midfield. Maybe he just needs some consistency, and I think we'll see. But I think when he was on the field and at his natural position, I didn't see him do too much, and I don't know if that's
he didn't do shit.
So we'll see. But hey, prove me wrong.
We'll see. Yeah. I'm Brandon. I'm Team Brandon. I'm gonna get a jersey.
I like it.
Real quick on sixes. What's your take? I love it. I love that there's off season pro lacrosse to watch. Obviously, the Olympics, blah blah blah. It's all good. In general, what's your view on it? What teams do you like in sixes? Who do you hate? Who's gonna win the championship? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I actually hate sixes for one reason and one reason only: long poles. So if this becomes the sport of lacrosse and international play, hey, I'm all for it. It's going to the Olympics. That's awesome. It's going to be great for our sport. But we've kind of just taken the sport and just made it something else. It's fun. It's it's energetic. But I loved when there were poles on the field. That's kind of obviously you're a long stick, I'm a long stick. If I'm coaching this team, the sixes team, and I'm going to the Olympics, I'm not taking any polls. I don't know, there are some polls on these lists that are good, can shoot twos and stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm attackman that can shoot the ball, midfielders, two-way midfielders, and I just don't know why. That's the one reason I don't like it, just because there's no long poles, right? Everything's a short stick. But that's probably my only reason I don't like it. But teams that are built for this, you look at, I'll just run through the rosters really quickly. But I think the Atlas, I don't think they're going to do much in this thing. Liam Entenmann's going to have 50 saves a game. He's going to see a lot of rubber, but they don't have. You go through the list, who's shooting two-pointers? You got Brian Costabile, he can bomb it from the outside. Miles Jones can bomb it from the outside. And outside of that, there's no guys that can shoot the two ball outside of that. So it's a really interesting roster. I don't think they're going to do too well, and that's just quick takes on it. The Whip Snakes, one guy that we haven't seen in a while, Brad Smith. He's been out for about, I think, a year and a half, 2 years with that knee injury. Going to be really interested to see how he looks. He's dynamic midfielder, can dodge in the midfield, but their roster is a little bit better built for this. Ryan Conrad out of the midfield that they picked up from the Water Dogs last year. Brad Smith. Rambo's going to put balls in the back of the net, not playing too much defense, I don't think. Colin Heacock, maybe he can shoot the two a little bit, but I think the best team in this, I'm going to go, I know you're going to say I'm biased here, but I'm going with the Cannons. I'm going with the defending champs. I think they're going to run it back. We got Bubba Fairman / Cole Fairman. He was dominating. They brought they got Brody Merrill coaching them, and there was a controversial hit last year, and I think they bring a lot of toughness. And you got Matty Campbell, he can bomb the two. Marcus Holman can bomb the two. So we'll see, but my money's on the Cannons again. I think they got the roster built for this. You look at these other rosters, if you can shoot you got a bunch of guys that can shoot the two ball. I think that bodes well for this thing. So we'll see what happens, but I'm riding with the Cannons.
Yeah, so I like sixes. I love watching this. I love that we get pro lacrosse in February. So I think it's like such an awesome thing that the league has done. If I were, and you already said it, I'm going to have to repetitive, but I would not put a single long pole on my team. And I don't think that I would put a single guy who doesn't play offense in the summer on my Sixes roster. I think if you look forward to the Olympics, like I would be heavily betting on Canada. The game is, to me, looks so much more like indoor lacrosse. And I just think you can find some offensive athletes and stick them on D and say, be gritty, and you get a great goalie in there. And like, that's how you get stops. Your goalie like bails you out more times than not. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I see. Brody, coached Team Canada when they won in Birmingham in the World Lacrosse, Sixes Championship. I think he learned that. And when I look at these rosters, I think that's where you see it. Like they have, Ethan Rawl is – so Ethan Rawl, Bubba Fairman, Jeff Traynor, but like Jeff Traynor is like the all-time leading points midfield scorer in UMass history. Like Ethan Rawl is really and Bubba, obviously was a number 1 overall recruit as a attackman coming out of high school.
Cole.
right. Ethan is the only player who really plays defense on that roster. And he was great for them last year. So, like, that's how I look at it. Like, when I build these rosters, like, when I'm thinking defense, I'm thinking guys like Brian Conrad, Brad Smith, Bubba Fairman. Like, don't give me a guy on defense who doesn't score a point a game in the 10 on 10. Because I just think the game's just not built for that. And the value of stops, it's more like basketball. Like, there's just way less value on getting stops. And whoever can score on a higher percentage of their shots taken and in the PLL version can hit twos, that's who ultimately is going to win. So I like the Cannons. I like the Archers. I think they very similarly have a roster that when you look at it, you don't see any poles. There's no, in fact, Mason Woodward, I think, right, is the only pole on the Archers roster. So like, that's what, like, those are teams that have been in the Champ Series. Obviously the Cannons have won it. I think they've taken the right lessons away. Those are probably my two favorites. The Whip Snakes next, and then I'm with you, the Atlas. Liam Entenmann, you're right. Like, that could be the X factor here. But that's the one that I probably have the most concerns about is kind of the roster that they've put together. So
who do you think?
Anyway, excited to watch.
Who do you got MVP prediction? Your champ prediction?
So, the Cannons don't have their secret weapon, which was Josh Stout. You mentioned the controversial hit. Blah, blah, blah. Josh Stout was crushing people out there. I like the Archers, I think, to win this. I think it's Archers Cannons is your final. MVP, I mean, I think Mac O'Keefe, like, probably is a guy, if I look at the Archers roster and I think about Sixes and we're talking about 2-pointers, like, he probably right now is the best shooter from outside in the world for my money. And if he has a chance to step in and hit a lot of them, I could see him doing it. I also, if the Cannons were to run it back and win, I mean, I could see, a guy like Will Manny or Marcus, who score the goals. I mean, they're going to give the MVP to the guys that score the goals. That's typically how this works from my experience. So those are probably the names that jump out to me.
I'm going Matt Campbell, MVP, Cannons repeat.
All right.
Bang, bang.
Cool. So should we get into some college lacrosse, Hartsey?
Let's get it.
So this is the time of the year, right? We're geeking out on PLL, but it's spring. It's college lacrosse season. I think we're going to, obviously, as we go through this, we're going to tinker with how we cover the sport and everything else. But our intention today is, like, let's preview the season. Let's cover some big storylines, and then let's go through the week 1 slate of games. And we're going to do our best to just touch on all the games in Division I lacrosse, and at least say nothing about it. If that's all we can think of, we're going to at least acknowledge it's happening, and we'll dive into some of the storylines. So here's maybe my first kind of question or prompt to you is, college lacrosse is obviously special. At this point, from a viewership standpoint, it's still the peak of the sport, in terms of eyes on Final Four weekend. I don't know this for sure, but I guess that's still where the top ratings in the sport of lacrosse live. What do you think about when you're thinking about January 26th and winter, early spring, college lacrosse starting? Like, what memories does it bring up? What is it like? What does it mean to you to get to kind of the start of the college lacrosse season?
This time of the year, right? Holidays, spending time with family, and then I always remember just going back to college after those, January after New Year's, going back, and then Salisbury just, in the weight room doing run lift tests. That kind of like built the excitement for me. Obviously, running and lifting, that's not the fun part. Being on the field is the fun part. But
so you do run and lift weights at the D3 level.
Yes, I think the only school that does it might be Salisbury. But no, you're good. Just getting down there and to the eastern shore of Maryland, and just we like to call it Title Town. Just get down there, get back in the gym, get back with the guys. Was always a special time of year, right? The cold, practicing out on the field in the cold before the spring hits. Those were probably my best memories, is just, kind of getting a break with the family, with the holidays, with friends, and then right back to work, getting back in there for, in-season conditioning and just getting ready for the season. It was a memory I'll always remember, heading back into the season. So that's probably my biggest one I always remember. My best memory of college lacrosse would have to be just obviously, winning a national championship. I know you got to do that at Loyola. Those will always be special, right? When you win it all the work you put in the beginning of the year, that's probably my favorite memory, is just winning my senior year at Ravens Stadium. I'm a big Ravens fan. We don't need to touch on the Ravens right now, but that was probably my best memory of college lacrosse, was ending it at Ravens Stadium with a national championship. So I know you're gonna. I know you're gonna just get. There's gonna be something about Lamar Jackson or something right now, but
I got that.
How about you?
One thing about the Ravens.
I knew it.
So I'm a Ravens hater, big time.
You should be by default a Ravens fan. You did 4 years at Loyola, so.
Just for context, they won a Super Bowl while I was there. It was very fun. But in the NFL season, when in the beginning of the season, the weather's really nice. Lamar Jackson, quarterback from Florida, thrives. Late in the season, you got to go to Buffalo. It's 5 degrees. It's freezing. And that's why I like to take the stance of just like put money in the bank. The Atlanta Falcons had Mike Vick for a long time. It was the same thing. We were so good. He's in the dome. Next thing you know, you're playing at Lambeau Field in a playoff game. You lose. So I know it. I do know it. What I think is interesting is college lacrosse is the opposite. The beginning of the season, you get some wonky games. Like I remember seeing a few years ago a game at Loyola where they lost to Holy Cross, and it was like 5 feet of snow on the sideline and a layer an inch or two on the field. It's snowing during the game. So I think it's a really cool thing about the spring season. You see the best lacrosse in May. The weather's nice. You're kind of getting the best version of these teams and players. Early season lacrosse is freaking cold. As a Georgia boy who had to go up there and play it, and I mean, it's weird to call it out, but it's worth calling out. It's such a storyline, like especially with college kids. Like your sticks are wonky because it's freezing or they're wet from the snow, and you don't know how everybody kind of handles that weather. And so I think early season is always interesting. You always get some kind of unique results and games and storylines. What I think about just at this time of the year is obviously just how special it is. We both are so passionate. We love pro lacrosse. We kind of know what it takes and some of the decisions you have to make as an adult to be a successful professional lacrosse player. But in college is just all you're doing is living and breathing your teammates, the camaraderie, the commitment to being great at something. Like it's kind of that one time. And I think this goes across the board, by the way, for all sports. Like pro sports are different. They're always going to be different. Players have families, players have wives, players have lives. Like you're just never going to have that same sort of locker room environment. That's what's so unique about college sports. It's so beautiful about college lacrosse. It's kind of an us against the world mentality for every single team and every single locker room. And this time of the year, it's possibility. That you mentioned, I won a national championship. We were not ranked in the top 20 at the start of the year. Like the only people who know right now what they have in that locker room are the guys on that team. And I think this year more than any, Kyle, there were a lot of big names. Like if you go look at the first team All-American list from last year, a huge majority of them are playing in the PLL now. So it's a year for me. The theme of the college lacrosse season is going to be new faces, new stars, who's going to step up, new personalities kind of taking over programs and teams in a leadership position. And I think that's going to be really fun to watch. So that's what I'm most excited for. So I want to just, as kind of an approach to previewing this, I want to just ask you some questions and just kind of put it out there. Let's talk about the season as a whole, and then we'll go through the week 1 slate of games and, call it and come back to it. So the first question I had is, and this is I'm going to get right into the thick of it. Like, what's a team, when you look at the top 20, when you look at kind of the season from a preview perspective, where do you see a team or a program where the coach is coaching for his job? Coach is on the hot seat, program's not living up to expectations, team's not living up to expectations. Like, who's a program where you feel like something's got to happen this year or else changes?
I mean, man, I think there's a couple teams. The one that sticks out to me and has been for the last, I don't even know how this guy still has a job. The last 5 years, maybe more than that, they've had the top recruiting class, I think, almost, every year. UNC, University of North Carolina. I don't know how he's retained his job there because, UNC hasn't even, I don't even know the last time they've been to, I couldn't even tell you when they've even been in contention. So I think Bresci's in the hot seat. I think maybe he brought Bill Belichick down there and he's got another 10 years. I know he signed an extension, which I just do not get. I think UNC needs a facelift. I think they need a complete culture change down there. I didn't play there. I don't really know what's going on there, but hearing from some alumni, a lot of them want change there. They speak very highly of Bresci, but they also think that there needs to be a facelift there. I would say UNC has got to be number one, coaches in the hot seat. I don't know if you've been down there, but UNC, it's beautiful campus, great place to play lacrosse, and they suck. Yeah, they suck.
They have sucked.
Yeah.
I saw like a stat where it was like the high-powered offenses, some adjusted efficiency offensive stat, and they were like in the 40s next to like the team above them and below them were like programs that you wouldn't recognize.
Yeah.
Which is so totally, to me, that's the obvious choice. I know nothing of the contract situation, but that's an obvious choice. Like, what the hell is going on in Chapel Hill? Why? And you know what? The year they won the national championship with Bresci, they barely snuck into the playoffs, and then Bones Kelly started winning a million face-offs and freaking.
That was Cloutier. That was Cloutier year, wasn't it? Last time
across so many times, Cloutier all of a sudden is turns into freaking Gary Gate out of nowhere. So even that was a flash in the pan, and it just feels like that's what's kind of floated him and that program, and it's like what is going on? They're just year after year predictable, terrible. I'm out on them again this year. Don't see it. Give me a bunch of names, put them all on first team All-American. They're my Baltimore Ravens. No, I don't care until you show me. I don't believe in you like that. Just don't. But to give you a different answer for me, I think I look at Joe Amplo at Navy. I just think what he did at Marquette was insane. Not a chance to fully play for him on Team USA, but going through kind of the process, I walked away from that this is one of the best coaches I've ever been around. The guy just such a good communicator, simplifies the game. When he took that job, I thought that Navy lacrosse would look like Army lacrosse looks like right now, as we're in top 10 contending, and it just hasn't been that. So I don't know, call him for jobs. I don't know if he's on the hot seat or not. I do know that Navy lacrosse job is one of the, it's one of the premier jobs in the sport. Who doesn't want to go live in Annapolis?
High paying, I hear too.
Very high paying. So I think that's one to watch. I just think the Patriot League is, Army's kind of owned it for a while, and I gotta think at Navy that's not chill,
Nope.
So I think it's important for an important season for Amplo and for Navy lacrosse to make some waves. So my next question then is, Hartzell, what's a team outside of the top 10? And we can pull up the rankings here the polls, but what's a team outside of the top 10 that you look at and say that team could make a Final Four run, maybe a championship run this season?
Man, you touched on Army a little bit. They would definitely be out of the top 10. Yeah, there's so many teams that are ranked way too high. I'm definitely not picking an Ivy League.
I've got Army at 12.
Yeah,
so
Army's just out of the top 10. Yeah, I'm probably going to take Army there. I hear from our one of our analytics on this podcast. He's our face-off specialist. Jerry Raganese calls in with all the face-offs and who's the best face-off guy in the country. Apparently, Army has one of the best face-off guys in the country, if not the best I've heard from him. So, not that that's going to win them, games, but I think just from a support our troops, America, I'm going with Army outside. They're just outside of the top 10, but man, there are so many teams that just graduated so many guys. I think there's going to be a lot of parity this year. I think you're going to see a lot of teams that aren't even in the top 20 maybe jump up into, the surprise you. I'm going to go with Army, Scott. I think Army is going to be a team that's going to shock everybody coming out of the gates. I don't know a ton about the team, but just hearing from some Army alums, and then Jerry Raganese very high on Army right now. So I'm going to go with Army out of the top 10 as my team to shock.
I think your pick lacks creativity. I think it lacks vision.
Do you just hate America, or I don't understand?
Great pick, Kyle. They were number one in the country at one point last year. Like, real bold. Good job. Good work.
Well, I was going to go with Harvard, but I'm not going to pick an Ivy League school. It's just not going to happen, unfortunately.
So, Army, yeah, we'll see. They're well coached. Evan Plunkett's really good. You mentioned the face-off guy, really good.
Rutgers, maybe? Yeah, I don't know. Interesting.
So for me, I look at two teams. You just mentioned one of them, Harvard. Sam King is a young attackman there who's very, very good. I think Jerry Byrne quietly has been bringing in super talented recruiting classes, and they, it's like they're one of those teams last year that flirted with like winning the Ivy League, which if you're winning the Ivy League, you're the top 3-4 team in the country. And they didn't. They lost a lot of 16, 17 games and things like this. So they're an interesting one to me. I think they could break through. The other one that jumps out as the team right behind them in the NCAA, in the Inside Lacrosse Media Poll, which is Richmond. I think Richmond, again, is a program now that's clearly established itself as a kind of perennial, contender in terms of making the tournament and then making noise. They're constantly going deep into games with the ACC schools on their schedule, with Duke and Virginia and others. Like, that's a team that has the look and feel to me of one that's ready to break through. They've had coaching staff consistency with kind of obviously Dan Shamati, who's been there a long time. Paul Richards now, who's kind of been his key assistant, been there a long time. Like, they just feel to me like and I've heard some things about the way their fall scrimmages went, where they were kicking the shit out of people. Like, I just think they're teetering on the edge, and if they get a good draw. Now, don't get me wrong. You'll lose if you're Richmond and you lose a game or two in the regular season, and then you win your conference tournament. But because of those losses you took in the regular season to like conference opponents, you all of a sudden end up with kind of a lower seed, and you have to play Virginia in the first round. Like, that sucks. Like, it's a very fine line they have to walk. But if they get a good draw, I can see Richmond making a Final Four run. From outside of the top 20 at some point.
You'll see they come out hot against Maryland out of the gate, so you'll see where they stack up pretty quickly.
Yeah. So here's another question that was kind of on my mind is, what's the first team inside the top 5? So let me give you the Inside Lacrosse Media top 5. So of these 5 teams, what's the first team that you could see losing to an unranked opponent? Right, so like, who's the team in here that basically, at least early season, doesn't need to be there? You've got Notre Dame, you've got Syracuse, you've got Cornell, Princeton, and Maryland. And then let's include 6 and 7 in that. Virginia, and 8. Virginia, Duke, Hopkins. I mean, there's the blue bloods of college lacrosse all in there.
Man.
Notre Dame, Cuse, Cornell, Princeton, Maryland, the Who's, the Devils, and the Blue Jays. in that group, who's the team that's going to disappoint you early in the seasons?
I mean, I think Duke's ranked way too high. I mean, they lose 180 or was it 135 plus points on their attack. They lost their entire attack unit. So it'll be interesting to see who emerges as the stars down there on attack. So I'd say if I had to pick one, you had a gun to my head, I'm going to say Duke is definitely going to drop out of the top 10 pretty quickly, just because they've just lost so much. They've had, Charles Balsamo, who transferred to UVA, sophomore. I don't know. Obviously they've picked up people in the transfer portal, Maryland transfer, their ex-attackman, Richmond transfer, but yeah, man, I mean, Brennan O'Neill, Dyson Williams, Zawada, losing those three guys, I mean, that's a huge, huge loss. You're really going to have somebody step up. Tyler Carpenter, obviously PLL All-Star this last season. Yeah, if I had to pick really quickly, Duke's definitely one of the teams that is definitely going to, I think, lose to or drop out of the top 20 pretty quickly and lose to a team that you would not expect them to lose to. And again, all of these teams have lost a lot. Princeton, I mean, they retain their entire first attack line, first midfield line. I think they're gonna be really good this year. But yeah, I'd say Duke, man. Duke's definitely a team that's gonna probably lose some games this year. I hope they prove me wrong, but we'll see. But
we know Duke does that anyway.
Yeah, out of the gates. Yeah, but it's gonna be hard to replace all that. But
that's true. So this goes for you and me. I think this goes back to our conversation with Zed and Brandau. I actually think Duke will be better, and it's not a criticism on Brennan O'Neill or on any of these star players, Dyson Williams. But I just think sometimes when you have total transformation, when you have new voices, new leadership, new style of play, new everything, you get this jolt of energy that can feed into practice and preparation and performance. And I just think Duke has been under the microscope, having the best player in the country for the last few years, and the whole offense has to go through him. And if you're the offensive coordinator, you're Matt Janowski, you're hearing how do we get Brennan involved versus how do we just run team offense and this and that. I actually think they might surprise us this year. I think that it might be freeing for we know they have talented players there. It might be freeing for some of them to just holy shit, we don't have to all just rely on Brennan or on Dyson. So they're to me, I actually think they could surprise us and be really good. The team that I see just taking a step back in that group is Maryland. I grew up in the Dave Cottle Maryland days, where every great player in Maryland was 6'4". You had Brian Farrell. You had these you just had the big dudes. You had Yateman and then you had number one on offense. Just Rambo, tough, big, heavy. Heacock, tough, big, heavy. They're obviously Big Ten now, but it's you go out to the club tournament, the biggest kid on the field, that kid's going to play in Maryland. That's kind of the University of Maryland I think of, and obviously John Tillman's been insanely successful there. But the Maryland team that I look at now, since Bernhard and Bubba and this
Cole,
kind of class left,
Cole, not Bubba, Cole.
I don't see it. So I don't know who the star player is on offense. It's a lot of good players. I don't know who's great. Ajax is unbelievable. Right, he's not 6'4", and I like my Maryland Terrapins to be 6'4". So they're the one to me where I just
I'm saying they do have highly tutored recruit coming in, big boy on attack, Spencer Ford. So you'll see his debut this year. I think him and Urksa, it's going to be a young attack, but I think you're right. They do lack the size that they usually have. So we'll see, but they're always a contender.
Noah Urksa coached him. He's unbelievable player.
Yeah.
But again, it's just the number one matchup at the highest level against the. It's just I just think so. They're one for me. I wonder if they're gonna a little bit of a dip they took last year is going to continue. Maybe I'll be wrong, but that would be the team I would call out there. So next question and maybe kind of to push it forward, any individual players whether it be from a from a Tewaaraton perspective, right? Who's going to win the Tewaaraton, or maybe it's like positionally defense. Obviously, I know you do a lot of coaching and a lot of film breakdown there on the defense side of the ball. Like, who are the couple of players in college lacrosse you're really excited to watch? And then let's get into talking about the week 1 slate of games.
Inside Lacrosse had these two guys on their second team. I think they're the two best defensemen in the country. Sean Light, Notre Dame. I think he's going to be a PLL great when he gets there. He's only a sophomore, and he just lights out. The kid doesn't get beat. His off-ball presence, he's always in the right stance off ball, on ball, stick out in front. He just doesn't get beat. Ty Banks, Georgetown, you'll see him in action against Loyola. He's another one, shutdown defender, sophomore, young kid. He's another PLL guy I think is going to be, we'll be hearing about him in 3 years here. But they're my two on defense to look for, Sean Light, Ty Banks. LSMs. So LSMs, I know you like guys that like to go down the field and score, and so do I. Ben Ware, UVA, he's my top guy there. He had 13 points last year, 26 college turnovers, 98 ground balls. And then close second to that's Notre Dame, Will Donovan, rocks number 81. That's probably the main reason I like that kid. But they're my two LSMs to watch up top. Attacked, obviously, this kid probably going to be the number 1 overall pick in the PLL draft is CJ Kirst. The kid's an animal. He's a kid that can, you can put him at the midfield, you can put him at attack. He's very, I think, could play wherever you put him on a PLL roster. I think he's probably the number 1 overall pick because he can run out of the midfield. He can play it, obviously, his natural position to attack. So he's probably the number 1 guy for me there at attack. Obvious pick. Midfield, Ben Johnston. I think this kid's going to be a PLL stud. Duke midfielder, 6'1", 220. 29 points last year as a midfielder as a freshman. I think he's probably going to – a lot of weight's going to be on his shoulders this year coming out of the midfield for Duke. But he's a guy that – he got a pull as a freshman last year quite a bit. And then Jordan Faison, I think he's the other midfielder to watch. They pretty much had similar years production-wise, 30-ish points. But Jordan Faison, obviously, is a matchup nightmare with his speed and two-way. He can play defense. But overall, those would probably be my two midfielders. And then Coulter Maxey, I think he's going to be another stud this year in college lacrosse. But all those guys I named, I think all of them are going to be PLL pros for sure.
Yep, agreed. So for me, you mentioned it. I mean, I'm excited to watch Spallina and see how this all plays out. I think this is something we'll dig into further later as far as just, he's entering that kind of like, all right, you've been very, very good, but like the expectations probably unfair for him or to be, otherworldly. Maybe he hasn't quite done that yet. Syracuse looks like they got a really good team. Like I'm excited to watch him.
Do you know Syracuse? Do you know who Syracuse reminds me of when they play? They remind me of the team that you coached, the best club lacrosse team of all time. That Sandstorm. What was the name of that team?
I don't know.
The Flamingos or whatever the hell they were called. You and Brian Holman ruin your club lacrosse experience. That's what Syracuse reminds me of, how loose they play and how, just their overall vibe. But continue.
I think they're going to be really fun to watch this year. And I actually I'm super high on Spallina. To me, the story with him is if you give him the number 1 defenseman and you say, well, Joey's supposed to go out there and win his matchup and score 8 goals and that's not who he is. Even when in club lacrosse in high school, he was on great teams. He's a great player that knows how to play with other great players. So I just think the better people you put him around, the better he becomes. And I don't mean that at all as a criticism. I think it's a strength. I mean, look at what he did on Team USA Indoor, playing with a bunch of pros, and he was one of the best guys out there. So he's not Mikey Powell. He can't just, break down a top defenseman over and over and over again all game long, but he can play on ball, he can play off ball, he can shoot, he can feed, So I think that as the team around him has gotten better, we're going to see more out of him. And ultimately, they need to go to a national championship, or else it's in his 4 years, or else it's in the media world or in the Twitter sphere or whatever, it's a failure.
Yeah.
I think he'll do well this year. I think they do have a really good team around him. I think there will be games where he's lighting it up. I think there will be games where he isn't, but that's what makes him good. He takes what comes to him and he plays the game the right way. And so I'm a fan of his game. I think that, there's a couple other names. Like, I'm excited to see what McCabe Millen does at Virginia with Schellenberger gone. Like, it's can you step into taking on the number one matchup and being the guy that kind of, has to own the offense. I think that'll be exciting to watch. I talked about Harvard. I think this kid, Sam King, this attackman at Harvard, he's just a Gilman lacrosse player, Kyle. He's got nice Gilman hair. He just plays with both hands and makes the right pass, and he can, he throws skips like he's just a classic Baltimore, just ex-attackman who I think is really talented and fun to watch. But my favorite player, I think, in college lacrosse, and a guy that I would love to see end up on the Tewaaraton finalists, pool, is Evan Plunkett, the midi from Army. Like, again, they're probably biased. Roswell, Georgia native, from my home state, but he is just tough as nails. He can shoot, he can feed, he can dodge. You could give him a pole and stick him in a close defense, and he'd probably be an All-American in that position too. I think he does it all. But it's another one of these things, like Army is the darling. They're Hartzell's pick for a non-top 10 team to make it to the Final Four. Like, at a certain point, if you're going to be the darling, like, you got to prove it. Like, win the Patriot League and win a tournament game. And Evan needs to be the best player on their offense for them to do that. He needs to, win matchups with number one long poles. I think he can. I think he will. Don't know if they're going to make a run, but I think he's ready to kind of step into that, like, I am the best midi in the country type of role. So he's kind of my guy on that. All right, Kyle. Well, we're over an hour here, but maybe we just spend a few minutes, talking through this week one slate of games.
Yep.
I think we had kind of talked about, or like made a plan to just let's acknowledge all the games in Division I men's lacrosse. We'll probably spend more time on than others. So if you go through the kind of the slate from a time standpoint, you got Wagner, Manhattan, Lafayette, Air Force, kicking us off on Saturday, February 1st. Mm-hmm. When I say those four teams, Wagner, Manhattan, Air Force, Lafayette, how does that make you feel?
I mean, probably all of those games. I mean, it's just a coin flip for me because I know nothing about those teams, and I'm not going to Google anything on them because they're not going to win or come close to winning a national championship this year. So I'm just not going to waste too much energy there on those teams. I don't know what your thoughts are on them, but yeah, I'm just not. I don't. When you say those names, it doesn't get me excited.
If you're a fan of, and there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to do this too. If you're a fan of Wagner, Manhattan, Lafayette, or Air Force, you got to earn it. You got to give me something to talk about. I'll watch. I'll be following. NJIT did it last year, right? They became the darlings of like the lacrosse media world with their start. Like, that's where you're at in your program's evolution. You gotta do something to make us pay attention. And so there's your opportunity this weekend with these kickoff games. Now, Duke Bellarmine is the next one, right? Hartzell, that's on the list. That's probably more intriguing. We've seen Duke lose games like this early season. Bellarmine, Dylan Ward played there, so they got that.
Duke minus
any upset for Duke here or no?
Duke minus 10.5. I'm gonna take the points with Bellarmine in that game. I'm gonna take the 10.5. Yeah. I would go with that, but I mean. Obviously, the game's out of the gate for these teams, especially the ones that don't have they have lost their entire attack units, and it's just going to take some time, I think, for them to get rolling. Maybe not, but I think Duke obviously going to win that game, but I'm going to take Bellarmine 10.5 points there for sure.
Yeah, I like Duke. I like Duke to cover. I mean, I already said my piece on Duke. I think they're going to have new faces excited to take ownership of starting position. So I think a game like this is one where a guy who got to dodge once or twice a game last year, who's going to get to dodge 15 times, is going to be pumped and he's going to go score a bunch of goals. I don't know who that guy is for them. It's McAdory or
Johnston.
Whoever,
I think Johnston's going to have he'll have a day.
Yeah. So Duke will roll. Bucknell Merrimack is my early pick for game I am least likely to watch.
What do you mean less likely to watch? Where are you going to watch it? Is it on?
Well, I'm looking at it. There's a web stream. Patriot League, which Merrimack's not, but Bucknell does a decent job. But anyway, again, look, we're gonna hate on you guys. And you got to earn it. Give us a reason to watch. Merrimack
plus 4.5. I'll take Merrimack with the points. Let's move to the next one.
Mike Bucknell, Patriot League. Bucknell will win that game by 5. Georgetown, Loyola. So look, this is a more intriguing game. Loyola, obviously, alum and won a championship there. I like to think of us as a blue blood program. We're one of whatever it is, 8 or 9 programs to win a Division I national championship. Has underperformed, hasn't won a Patriot League in a long time. I think it's a bigger question, Kyle. Like, Loyola's in the middle of Baltimore. It's got this rich lacrosse history. Do you think that they're a victim of NIL and like the new landscape of college sports? Like, I think I look at it and just feel like guys in the lacrosse world that used to want to go to Loyola, like, now look at a Michigan or look at a Ohio State or a Penn State or like, an Ivy League. And I just feel like it's a harder proposition to win there than it was even, 10, 15 years ago when I was playing. Like, what do you think about this game? What do you think about generally programs like Loyola that are in that kind of like, maybe they're a mid-major school in Division I sports, but they've always been kind of a blue blood of maybe not a blue blood, but a clear top 20 program in college lacrosse. What's up? Give me. I'm too biased to look at it. What's up? What's going on with Loyola?
Yeah, Loyola. They're +4 over Georgetown. They're the underdog in that game. I think Loyola Maryland's best days are behind them, Scott. I think winning that national championship. I don't know what's going on there. You would know more. You would know more than me. But just watching them on TV over the last couple of years, I just. They just don't excite me very much when I watch them. Sorry to be so harsh on your alma mater, but
that wasn't harsh.
But you look at it; it's a great place to play. That stadium they built. It's right down the street from Hopkins. You got that rivalry. Towson, they're in a great location, or not great location, but just like there's a lot of good schools that go there or to go in that town in Baltimore. Towson, Loyola, Hopkins, or kids choosing to go to Hopkins over Loyola. I don't know what that storyline is there, Scott, but I'm gonna take Georgetown -4 in this game. I think Georgetown covers.
Yeah, look, Georgetown's done a really good job with, I think, like the transfer portal. Like they look to me kind of like a modern program. Like they like have homegrown talent, then they bring in these studs. Are they a Final Four team? Can they kind of break over that hump? I don't know. Loyola has a tendency of winning games like this. They do. Like, when you want to count them out, they're so well coached with Toomey and Dwan. I think from a talent perspective, they're super overmatched here. Like, so I probably wouldn't bet on them, even with that spread. But usually that's when you get your key performance out of them. I just think with Loyola, it's, there was kind of obviously the team we won the championship with, and then there was the Pat Spencer era. There was, Justin Ward and Joe Fletcher. Like, there was this 10-year period where they were not just, top 20, they were top 10, top 5 kind of consistently. They haven't been able to do that. If you look at the preseason All-American and you look at the Patriot League representation, you see Army, you see Lehigh. In recent years, BU has like consistently put players kind of on that level. I think Loyola has fallen behind. I'm optimistic that look, whatever talent they do have there, that coaching staff's going to get the most out of it. But yeah, I think this is going to be a tough game. I think Georgetown is really good and has been building something there and are probably legit play late into May contenders. And I think right now, you got to be honest, Loyola doesn't look like that, but. Interstate rivalry, always a fun one to watch, so we'll see.
Maybe it's time for a coaching change. Maybe it's time for a coaching change over there at Loyola. We'll see.
It's interesting, Kyle, because like, again, how many coaches have won a Division I national championship? Like, not many.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, like, I don't think there's a ton of heat or pressure on him in that regard. I think you look at Van Arsdale at the offensive coordinator. He wasn't there for that run, obviously. So, yeah, they're probably at a point where there's going to be – you've got a guy like Justin Ward who played at Loyola who's having success up at Army. I mentioned Paul Richards and Dan Shamati who have either played or coached at Loyola. You've got a lot of Loyola that's out there, in the coaching sphere. So, again, this is going to be an interesting year. But where I'm at now with it, Kyle, is just usually when the vibes at Loyola are like this, it's when Toomey gets the most out of the guys. That was us, right? We were ranked outside of the top 20 in 2012 and won 18-1 and won the championship. So that storyline may be one we revisit later in the spring, but for now, I think it's just let's just wait and see what comes out of Ridley this year. couple other ones quick here. Mercer and Hampton.
Don't care.
Hampton, like,
I'm just kidding.
Mercer, we know who they are. They're Georgia. They're mid-major. They're, again, Hampton, are they ever going to win a big game? We ever going to get a Hampton moment? I haven't seen it yet. Mercer probably. What's the spread on that?
Plus 11.5. Hampton's plus 11.5. I'm taking Hampton with the points.
Mercer's going to win 15. I think they've got a solid little program built down there. I'd love to see Hampton do something, but we're not there yet. High Point Navy, High Point, new coach, right? John Crawley down there, super successful program. He was a big hot name, right, with kind of what he was able to do at Hopkins as their offensive coordinator, leading a turnaround. You had a young, energized guy. I mentioned kind of Amplo, for all intents, one of the best coaches in college lacrosse, but like, where are the results? Like, I think I'm circling this game, like one of the most interesting week one matchups to me. I feel like they're two kind of well-matched teams. You got new, young, up and kind of John Crawley's like the Sean McVay of college lacrosse. He's like this young guy who, going back to the Paul Rabel documentary, and you see Crawley like calling out Rabel in the locker room about running the plays. Like the guy's got gusto as a coach and confidence, but taking on a head coaching job it's a big jump. Are you ready? Amplo been there, done that. Do you have the talent that High Point has? I don't know. So what's the spread on that one?
Navy's minus 1.5. They're at High Point. High Point's getting 1.5 points, but I think I'm taking Navy in that one. I'm assuming that him coming in as a head coach, he lost some recruits to the departure of Torpy, who went to Brown. He probably took a lot of that recruiting class. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm taking Navy.
Cool. I like Navy there too, but I think that's one to circle. That's one of the most intriguing week one matchups for me. Iona Hofstra, the boys from Long Island. Iona first-year program. Shout out to them. Getting going. They're going to get smoked. Hofstra
minus 13, taking Hofstra all day.
Yeah. Holy Cross Providence. Never heard of them. You got anything? Jacksonville, Syracuse?
I got nothing. Jacksonville, Syracuse. I think Syracuse is going to come out and throttle Jacksonville. That game is at Syracuse 2 in the Dome. Syracuse is minus 7.5. I'm taking Syracuse minus 7.5 all day in that game.
Yeah, you got John Galloway going home. It's an interesting storyline. Jacksonville's been frisky, but it seems like they kind of had this exciting peak moment. And I don't know. I think this Syracuse team is really good.
Yep.
That's at the end of the day, that's my point of view. Syracuse. There's not a weakness. When we talked about players, they got an LSM up there who's fantastic. They got Billy Dwan.
I love Billy Dwan. He's going to be a stud. He's a stud.
They're just, their offense is ridiculous. They're a team that is must-watch TV to me, and Jacksonville's just not going to have the firepower. Rutgers Lehigh, that's another one to circle. Two good teams. Rutgers, same thing. Has flirted with being breakthrough. It seems like they've lost some kind of the name, the big name players in recent years. Don't really know. I personally did my homework. Don't really know exactly what we're going to get out of those teams, but I could see that being a 1 or 2 goal game,
close,
one way or the other.
You're on point. Close spread. +1. Rutgers is +1.5. So
so I like Lehigh there. I like Patriot League lacrosse. I think Lehigh will find a way to win that
game. I'm going with Rutgers +1.5.
Richmond, Maryland. Phenomenal. I mean, we've gotten this. We've seen Richmond upset in this game, I believe, in recent years. These are two very, very good teams, two legit programs. It's early season lacrosse. I like Richmond. Give me Richmond to win this game. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, last year, right, opening the college season, or it might have been 2 games in the season, Richmond took them to overtime, almost beat Maryland. That game was at Richmond, so this game's at Maryland, I think. Maryland minus 4.5. I'm going to take Richmond plus 4.5.
Yeah, I like them with the points. I like them. I'd pick them to win straight up. In this one, but it'll be an interesting one to watch. Mount St. Mary's in Queens. That's probably in the top 3 least interesting games of the week to me. Would love to see one of those programs give me a reason to give me something. Give me a guy with long hair who shoots it from 18 yards, or give me a defenseman who wears knee-high socks and gets 3 slashing. But just give me something.
There's not even a line. There's not even a line on that game. So, no, there is. It's minus 1.5. Mount St. Mary's minus 1.5. Queens is plus 1.5. I'm gonna go blindly with Queens getting the points. That's all I got.
I'm going to pay attention. But give me something. Give me a personality. Do something weird. Like, I just entertain me, or else
we'll see.
This is what it's going to sound like.
It's not going to be great. It's not going to be
great. Okay, Utah, Ohio State, another just awesome early season matchup. Utah just seems to continue to get better and better. They play that up-tempo style of play. Ohio State, obviously, at this point, is an established, top 15, top 20 type program.
Is he in the hot seat? Ohio State, when are they going to – what's going on over there?
Yeah, I mean, they've been to a national championship game. Like, they've had really good years. You're right, they have not gotten over the hump in recent history, just like Michigan has kind of like been more of the darling and Penn State of the Big Ten, a role that Ohio State kind of once played. But they're still bringing in top-tier recruits. They've done a lot in the transfer portal as well. But I don't know, Kyle. I don't know the college game like the pro game, but like I don't know that I can name a player on Ohio State right now. Can you?
No. Bob Van Buren, is he still there? Yeah, he's still there. He already graduated last year. I don't know. Utah. I'm going Utah. Utah's getting +3. I'm taking the Utes at Ohio State +3.
Yeah. I think that's a 1-goal game. I think Ohio State probably wins the 1-goal game. Just a little more belief still in that program that they're supposed to win these types of games. Colgate, Penn State. So Colgate last year was awesome. Like, came onto the scene. They were competitive in the Patriot League. They won big games early. They got a midi named Charlie Lohman who plays both ways. Big tough kid, worth watching. Like, I like Colgate. I think Colgate's a program on the rise. Obviously, Penn State, you lost Malone. Like, there's going to be turnover there. I think, if you look at the end of the season, I think you probably would pick Tambroni and his Penn State team over Colgate. But I think this is a game, like, early season college lacrosse. I could see Colgate winning this one. So put Penn State on upset alert for me.
Colgate +3.5. I'm taking Colgate with the points.
Michigan, Marquette. There's a kid at Marquette, Bobby Gray, I think is his name, who's got supposed to break all sorts of scoring records for Marquette history. I don't know who previously held the scoring records for Marquette history, but
coaching debut.
They got some great, they got Richard and Liam Burns. Like, they got some great D guys that I can think of coming out of there.
Yeah. Coaching debut for
risky, though. I think.
Yeah. Coaching debut for Jake Richard. So we'll see how they stack up. They're +8 at Michigan. Yeah, he's the head. Yep. He's the head coach there now.
How about that?
+8, Marquette +8. I'm going to take Michigan -8. I'm taking Michigan -8.
Yeah, I think Michigan will win that game as well. But I do think, just put Marquette, put them in the back of your mind somewhere. They might be first.
We'll see.
Denver Hopkins. Last year, this game was incredible. Early season, right? Denver scored what was it? Denver scored
JJ Silstrop
a bunch of goals in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. I think one of JJ, I think there was that play on the end line. They tied it up, took the OT, and then won. Yeah, that was a heartbreaker for Hopkins. But that's a close. It's a tough game for Johns Hopkins to open with. They're going to Denver. First game of the year, going out and playing the altitude. It's probably going to be cold as shit out there. But they've been practicing the cold. Can't use that as an excuse. Johns Hopkins -1.5. I'm taking Johns Hopkins -1.5. I think this is also, they've lost obviously quite a bit, but they've also gained. They got a lot of up-and-comers and got some kids from the transfer portal, but I'm taking Hopkins -1.5 here. They open up the season on a good note.
All right, I like Denver in this one. I think Matt Brown, really good coach there.
Yeah.
Going to Denver is hard.
Very hard.
It's altitude. Hopkins, I don't know. Are they soft? I don't know. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So
yes. Yes.
Give me Denver in that one, but Hopkins is an interesting team to watch. What I really think there, Kyle, is I think losing Crawley, let's see, I don't know. I think he was a big part of what made their offense go here recently. I know they have talented players, but is there going to be a little bit of a kind of a ramp up for a new offensive coordinator there to kind of get back to what we saw from them last year? We'll see, but I like Denver early season over Hopkins. So
Brian Kelly got promoted as the offensive coordinator there. He was a long time head coach at Goucher. I know him. He's very, very, very dialed in. I think that offense is going to be clicking out of the gates. And we'll see in the Denver game. But I think you also make a good point there. Like, once you lose an OC, they had a lot of good success last year. Obviously, losing the UVA in the overtime in the tournament. We'll see what that looks like. But I think they did. Brian Kelly knows his shit, and I think he's going to be dialed in. So we'll see.
All right. Well, that's a Saturday slate. You got a Sunday game, St. Bonnie's versus VMI.
I'm gonna go support our troops, VMI.
Luke Restarucci scores a ton of points for VMI. Like, he's like up near the top of the point charts most years. St. Bonnie, maybe the best player in the PLL right now is Brett Dobson, right? He played at St. Bonnie, so you got that going for you. We'll see. And then I think the Tuesday games will be back before then to break them down. So there's your week 1 preview, and that probably caps Hartzell the end of episode 1. We're going to learn as we go here, but it feels like
that was a good one.
Feels like we crushed it.
Thanks for listening in. We'll see you next week.